Hello, friends. We are here to review the latest episode of The Real Housewives of New York. Just like the other episodes, I really enjoyed this one, and I think we're getting some tea. And I'm glad that we now have like a topic that can be considered polarizing so we can get some chatter going. Again, I didn't fully get into the like Twitter hashtag, but I have my own opinion, and we'll get to it. But there was a lot of stuff in here that we can kind of dive into. And I have like some stuff is coming full circle for me. We'll chat. We're still in the Hamptons, child, and they're having the breakfast. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not even about to try. I meant to look it up, but I didn't. It looked really good. I'm like a picky eater, so I don't eat cheese and everything. So my initial thought was like, oh, that looks good, but if it has cheese in it, I don't want it. And then Erin's like, oh, I made an option with cheese and no cheese. So I'm like, oh, yum. So it looked good. And then anything with bread, I love a bread. So anything with bread sounds good to me. We get some conversation then about Bryn and like not having family relationships. And I mentioned this last episode because it started off more so with Sai, and then Bryn kind of chimed in and she was giving her. So it was really fun to hear more about Bryn's backstory this episode. I just feel like they do such a good job on Roni of like showing us who these characters are, and we learn so much about them in such a fast pace, and then we also see their dynamics with each other and family, and like, so it just all meshed together really well. So it was fun to hear this and to see the ladies kind of rally around her and just like listen and have that conversation. We also hear her talk about her third ex-fiance, I think she said, and his name is Gideon, I think it was. And I think she had an interesting take that I don't necessarily disagree with. She's like, I haven't really found the guy for me, and I don't really have family. So when I get lonely and I want to go on a trip, like I'll go by myself or I'll call up one of my exes and we just have a good time. I didn't necessarily hate that idea. So, I'm with her on that. I think that's how some people live life. Like, it is what it is, and it's clearly working for her. So that was fun. I thought that it was a kiki at first when ERIN was like, Jessel can't wait to leave. And then we get the confessional where Jessel's like, I'm ready to get the heck up out of here. And she literally is like packing her things to run up out the door. I hadn't picked up, well, I don't think they did a good job at showing us, but I hadn't picked up that Jessel was upset about anything. But I'm glad that it came full circle in the episode and we get to see it later. But that was interesting, yeah, because like I said, I thought it was a kiki at first, but baby, there was no kiki about it. And it also seems like, I was thinking back to the trip, and I'm like, well, was this a fun trip? You know what I'm saying? Like, I had fun watching it, but none of the girls really seemed to have had fun, right? Like, Jenna gave it a 5, and she's like, if we're doing letters, I would have to give it a C. But I don't know. She said, because it was like the girls trip thing, she's like, I don't really love girls trips, but I think she just didn't love the trip in general. So it didn't seem like the girls loved it. And, Sai's like, I barely ate. So it's just like, but it looked fun to me. And then I also even liked, in the episode learning, again, like I said, like we get so much at once, but it's making sense. Like, we learned about Uba's spice business and the fact that she was on Oprah's favorite things. And then we learned about ERIN's real estate business and the fact that it's a family thing and that's where she got it from. Like, that type of stuff was fun. So I really had a good time learning about that. And then finally, child, we leave the Hamptons and we get to move on. So the next like biggest thing, I was really actually like getting emotional watching it, was hearing Bryn talk about her background, like when she went to go get her hair done. And I had no idea that Bryn was mixed, so it was fun hearing that. And just like the whole dynamic of her saying, like, she never connected with the black side of her family. And, the only connection that in exposure she said that she got to the black community and especially black women was when her grandmother would drop her off at the hair salon every week, and she could sit there for hours every weekend. And she would sit there for hours. And that's how she kind of got exposed. And she said her grandma, her grandma's basically doing that to get rid of her, not like in a bad way, but like keep her busy. But she's like, that had a huge impact on me. Like, that made me kind of emotional watching that, because you get a lot of backstory about Bryn. Like, you see Bryn, I think she's a fun girl and she's witty and she cracks a lot of jokes, but there's obviously so much substance to her. Again, obviously don't judge a book by their cover, we all know that. but it's fun to hear it, and she just has so much story to tell. So that was a really really fun moment to watch. We get more into like the family story because I was talking about the show with some friends, and I'm like, we haven't really gotten much of Uba, so it was nice to be able, well, not nice, but it was a good opportunity to hear more about Uba and her family dynamic, and the fact that her mom passed, and she feels like she doesn't really know what next steps to take, in particular with her business, because her mom's not here, and she typically would lean on her mom. So that was also some nice insight to get about Uba, because I just don't feel like we've been able to get that just yet. And we got to go to her house. I think it's the first time that we've been to her house, so that was good too. What I really really liked about the episode was, I'm a dynamics person, so I like that Sai was able to go to her husband and have this conversation. I like seeing the husbands. I like seeing their dynamics with their husbands. And she's like, Brenda opened up to us about not having family, and Thanksgiving was coming up. So she's like, I want to have a Friendsgiving. And not only a Friendsgiving, but I want to dedicate it to Bryn. Like, this is Bryn's Friendsgiving. And so obviously, she calls Bryn on the spot, and she tells her, and they have like a good girlfriend conversation about it. So that was just super sweet. And I'm excited to see it. Like, and it just felt so authentic and so natural, because I feel like on Housewives you get these events a lot that just kind of feel forced and out of the blue, and able to get all of the ladies in one room. And this could have very well been that, but it just had a good premise and a good rhyme or reason to be happening. It made sense, and it just felt natural. So I was excited to see it. Like, it just felt like something that you would do regardless of whether the Bravo cameras are here or not. So I'm really excited to see that. What I didn't love, it was a little cringe. I really like Sai and Bryn. I like their banter, but they get to discussing Jessel, and I feel like a lot of the ladies have made light of Jessel's relationship with her husband, or the lack of intimacy with her husband that she opened up about. And obviously, like, when she first told them about it in the Hamptons, you could tell she was very reluctant to talk about it. And I said this, it didn't feel like she was super comfortable talking about it. And now it feels like the ladies are making light of it and using it against her. So I didn't love that. I did love seeing the dynamic of Sai's husband being, weighing in. And he's just like, you guys need to give her some grace. Now, they're bantering, but it's like he's holding them accountable and letting them know, like, no, y'all are kind of dragging it. Like, y'all need to give her some grace. Like, that's just kind of weird. So I did like being able to see that. It didn't just feel like, just a catty scene for the sake of being catty. We got some rationale in there. We then jump over to Jessel, and a fun conversation, a fun dynamic that I like seeing with her husband. She's discussing school for their twins and whether they should go to a Montessori school or a public school. And the debate here is costs. Like, he doesn't want to spend a bunch of money on the school because it's, I guess, like preschool or kindergarten or whatever the heck. And he's like, they're not going to be doing anything, so why would we spend a bunch of money on it? And she's like, well, they're going to be able to network and all this other stuff. I see both sides of it. Like, I think if I had the money and like connections or whatever, and the opportunity for my kids to go to a really fancy school, and the perk is just really that it's a fancy school and it's got connections and it has charcuterie boards at the welcome things for the parents, like, I probably would live for that too. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, we all want really nice stuff for our kids, so sometimes we kind of glamorize. Well, I don't have kids, but like, if I had kids, I'd probably like glamorize stuff. It's not, you don't always want to be like, oh, let's be reasonable and spend reasonable money. We have twins, we have 2 kids that we have to do 2 things for consecutively all the time, you know what I'm saying? So I saw both sides of it. It was just a fun conversation to see them have. It's not like it was a real conflict, but it was fun to see them have that conversation. But then I like that they got to get into the conversation of like the conflict that Jessel had when she was in the Hamptons. And it's clear from the conversation she has with her husband that she hasn't really dissected what the issue was, at least from the other ladies' perspectives. Because from her perspective, she says it started because she complained that it was cold. So I think she's missing like the principal point there, which highlights the point that I made last week where I'm like, I think she has an issue with like self-awareness and accountability, kind of based off of the conversation that they had when they went out to eat. And she kind of apologized, but she kind of like doubled down. So like it shows more like she just didn't understand. She hasn't grasped like what the real issue was. And you can tell, which I also liked. First of all, you can tell that her and her husband are friends. And you can tell that he's trying to break the news to her in the nicest way possible. And she's just like, are you calling me a bitch? And he's kind of like tiptoeing into it, like, well, like, you have tendencies. And she's like, okay, so you just call me a bitch. So, like, I like, again, another husband with some rationale. I like that he was able to kind of like, I don't know, level with her and have that type of conversation with her, like see it from this different perspective. So I like that as well. Like I'm really enjoying the dynamics from the husbands. It's not like annoying and they're just around, like they're having meaningful conversations, and it's worth the watch. We also get a flashback to, I think this contributed to her not fully understanding, I guess. I feel like she just thought the thing with Jenna was just resolved, I guess. And we get a flashback to like a conversation that she had with Jenna, which burns my biscuits, when they do these like critical scenes and they don't show them, but they'll get like, they don't really show them in the moment on the episode. They'll do a flashback. But I guess she had a come to Jesus moment with Jenna, and she feels like she understood the issue. So I don't know it, but it, like I said, from what she communicated to her husband, it doesn't feel like she fully understood it. But at least she had that conversation with Jenna, and they should allegedly be good. But that conversation obviously brought up some more issues because she's expressing that, her issue. And then I guess that does bring me back, like, I think she's not grasping the issue because she was on defense mode in that conversation and not just like listening for Jenna to be upset, right? And what I mean is she came to that conversation, expressed in that conversation, and left that conversation with an issue. And her issue was that Jenna went to the ladies about, being upset with her. And then ERIN and Sai brought it up just kind of like at dinner. Like it wasn't a grown up conversation. It wasn't a grown up, for her, it wasn't a grown up way to handle it, right? And she's like, I feel like if Jenna had a problem with me, she should have brought it to me. So at that point, now that I'm thinking about it more, she wasn't like, it's okay to have that view, but at that point, she wasn't like having a conversation with Jenna to be like, okay, Jenna, I understand where you're coming from and I apologize. She was doing that kind of, but also saying, but I don't like the way that you handled it. And I don't think that it was her time to do that, because if somebody's upset with you and you've done something wrong, that's not necessarily your time to say, well, you didn't handle it correctly. Like, you can't really police how people respond to your mistreatment. So that lends itself to the fact that, yeah, she's not really grasping what the issue is. But yeah, she, her biggest thing now is she's leaving with an issue with Sai and Bren. And, the cackling hag comment comes up, and she feels like they just kind of handled it childishly, which to a point they did, but I didn't think it was that deep. But Jessel explaining it that way does make sense to me, honestly, and I would kind of have to side with Jessel on that, because it's like, yeah, if it was a serious thing, although Jessel isn't digesting it well. But if it's a serious thing, let's have a serious grown-up conversation about it. Although I mean, I don't think it was so terrible when they brought it up in the Hamptons. Like, I know that they speak very forward and just very pointed. So it didn't feel so bad, but I can understand Jessel being on the receiving end, feeling like she was kind of ganged up on, and they were like litigating Jenna's issue. Like, they were poking at her based on Jenna's issue. It's how she took it, but I think that she was complaining in general, right? Like, Jenna's issue was interweaved in there, and the ladies had their own issue with her. So they kind of took Jenna's issue and used that to springboard into their own, right? So I can see why that would bother Jessel. And then after that, we get two confessionals that I didn't love, but two opinions from Jenna and ERIN. Like I said, still kind of making light of Jessel's issues. And, Jenna says her having stuff with her husband and not discussing it says a lot. I don't know what that means, but it's obviously a jab. But I guess she's trying to say, the fact that Jessel recognizes that her and her husband have intimacy issues and she hasn't discussed it with him, that says a lot about her. That's not fully thought out to me. I wish that she could have provided more context, but again, it's clearly a jab, so I didn't love that. And then Erin just says, well, she needs to get, which I didn't think was cool. It's funny, I guess, and it's a little bit of a read, but it's just like you're making, again, like I keep saying, you're making light of something serious that she came to y'all with reluctantly. She didn't really even want to talk about it, so I didn't love that. But then we also get her actually having the conversation with her husband, so that made it even worse. Because it's not like she's scared to have the conversation. Like, I think she had a natural moment in the Hamptons where she had an aha moment while they were at dinner. And she's like, maybe this is the issue with our intimacy. And she went home and she discussed it with her husband. And the funny part to see was that she was the one concerned about it, and he was just like, basically, like, it's not a big deal. Like, we have twins, we're busy, like, things are the way they are. Like, it's fine. Like, don't make it a big deal. And I love that because I feel like while the other ladies are making light of it and kind of like making her feel worse about it, and they're like, oh my God, you haven't had sex with your husband in 2 years. He's like, it's fine. You know what I'm saying? So I love that because that's the way that it should be from her husband. Definitely not from her friends, but that's the way it should be. Like, he's just like affirming, like, we're fine. Don't worry about it. It's not an issue. So I love that she was able to at least get that support from him. And I'm Team Jessel in this argument. She does complain a lot, and I think that the stuff that she was saying in the Hamptons was inappropriate, but I don't think that she's a bad person. And I don't think that that's, at first I think that they were just, at first I thought that they were just kind of making little funny jokes about her. Like I said, like it was just like a little kiki, but now it's seeming a little bit more mean, and I just don't like that. I won't even say mean. I don't want to use the word mean, but critical. I'll say critical. We finally get to the Friendsgiving, and I just feel like Psy looked amazing. Like, I was just in, like, I couldn't even focus on the beginning of the Friendsgiving and the opening of it because I'm just like, Psy looks fantastic. Bryn looked gorgeous too. And I thought it was funny, like, seeing Bryn coming in and flirting with the chef and him saying that he was married, but he was cute. I also thought that Sai's daughter was super cute. Like, I like seeing the husbands. I like seeing the kids interact, and you get to see their personality. Like, her daughter's talking to Uba, and she's like, your dress? She's like, I love your dress. Like, you look like a Barbie. Like, I loved seeing that. Like, that was fun. That's the type of stuff that we want to see on the show. I also, there's this thing where I wonder, like, and it keeps happening, so I'm going to keep noting it. Like, I feel like I noted a lot of stuff in the last couple episodes, and I'm like, I don't know if this is a big deal. I don't know if it's going to come back up, and then it comes back up. So I'm going to make a note. And, Sai has a shoes off house, and I have a shoes off house, so I get it. And even when she gave it more context, like, I don't want the New York streets coming into my house, I'm like, girl, that makes even more sense. But Erin made a smart comment, like, I would never make people take their shoes off in my house as part of the look. So again, I don't think that's a big deal, but I've had to eat my words obviously before because these things that I didn't think were big deals before pop back up. So let's see if that pops back up. Finally, I think each episode I get a little bit more color to Erin. I originally said like, oh, Erin's super type A and she seems a little bit sensitive, like she takes things a little bit too seriously. And then I was like, oh, well, Erin handled everything really well on the trip as a host. When the girls were being a little difficult, she was handling things well. And now I'm coming back to Erin's a little bit, she takes things a little bit too seriously. She kind of drags things. And I think she's going through that syndrome of when you're upset with somebody, everything they do bothers you. So Jessel comes in, and I feel like I can feel the uncomfortable kind of vibe for Jessel, like almost secondhand embarrassment, because it's just like she already felt like the girls were cackling hags and they were making a big deal. And it does feel that way now that we've seen the way that they've kind of talked about it and made light about her. Like, I feel her. So she's coming in and she kind of seems like she feels a little bit uncomfortable. And she's still trying to have conversations with the ladies and specifically Erin. Erin's been a little bit short. Understandably, Erin had a tough day, obviously, with going to the memorial for her family member. But she makes this issue with Jessel out of absolutely nothing. Like, Jess was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, she said it multiple times. She's like, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm sorry that happened to you. I had no idea. I'm sorry that happened to you. But then she also says, but I hope things went well today, meaning with the memorial. And it's just like, that makes sense to me to say. Like, even outside of the context, I'm going to get into the context. Outside of the context, saying that in general, that just wouldn't bother me. Somebody saying, like, I hope the memorial went well or the funeral went well. Like, of course, it's still an event. It's a sad event, but I still hope that it went well. I hope that everything went fine. But added context, she didn't even know that this was occurring. She had no idea that this family member had passed away. And she had no idea that the event was today. So she's killing two birds with one stone. She's like, I'm sorry that that happened. I had no idea. But also the memorial that occurred today that I had no idea that you were going to, I hope that it went well. And like Erin made a big deal out of that and kind of like took a jab at her for that. And I just didn't like that. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to I don't want to say that I'm starting to see who Erin is because I'm not. The show just started. We don't know. My opinion has been changing, but it seems like she can be a little bit petty, and I'm just like, I hope that it does seem like the girls are kind of tagging on with it too against Jessel, but I hope it doesn't continue like that. Like, I hope that there's somebody that can be a voice of reason. Like, Jessel has a point. Like, yeah, she does complain a lot, but y'all are dragging it at the end of the day. And speaking of dragging, so like they all come together in this group and the information gets disclosed that Jessel called them cackling hags. That is just so not a big deal. Like, I kind of feel like Erin made the memorial thing a big deal to springboard her into being like, oh, and guess what else Jessel said? Like, that's just not a big deal. Like, the ladies were literally laughing, like, well, what does cackling hag mean or whatever? But Bryn kind of fell into it, and she's like, but if you're gonna say something, like, say it, like stand 10 toes down, and like Bryn, like, that's not a big deal at the end of the day. Like, and she was on Watch What Happens. Like, to her credit, she's in the moment. She's being fed the information from a biased party. But when she did Watch What Happens live that night, she laughed at it. So I don't think that hopefully she's not too upset about it. Like I said, hopefully the other ladies are not as upset about Petty Erin, as upset as Petty Erin. But Erin's upset. I hope that she doesn't get everybody on her bandwagon because that's just not a big deal. Like, what she said was valid at the end of the day. Like, that is what y'all were giving. Honestly, y'all joined in on an issue that had nothing to do with y'all. It's okay to have the opinion that you guys had. I keep saying it. It's okay to have that opinion, but you're really like 10 toes down and you're really upset about it, especially us getting the background scene that she had the conversation one-on-one after y'all bombarded her with it. She had the conversation one-on-one with Jenna. It's done. Obviously there's fault to Jenna that she brought the information back. Fault I'm using loosely because if I'm talking to my friends, I would mention it as well. But I don't think that she was doing it to be messy. But she's still involved because she did carry that message. And so, but I don't even think. But Jenna said it too. She's like, it's really not that big of a deal though. So I mean, look. Hopefully, like I said, somebody can get on the side of Jessel and not have her over there looking crazy alone on an island because it's just not deep enough for that. But that's why I'm saying we're getting these polarizing things. Y'all may hate Jessel. I don't know. I didn't go through the tweets. I have no idea. Nobody has told me that. But I'm on the side of Jessel with it, where it's like, y'all are doing too much. But I'm interested to see what happens. And honestly, if they're going to keep acting like that towards her, I hope that Jessel bosses up and she puts them in their place because she looks like she has it in her. So, and she has a great support system of her husband. So, girl, you don't need those ladies acting crazy towards you over nothing. We'll see what happens.